I'm not hearing it. When I tap it, I hear it, but might be my volume turned down. It's good to be home. Had a good week with the brethren at the Center Hill congregation in Florence. I think it technically is something like Lexington, Alabama, but it's basically Florence. But I always say, no place like home. It's always good to come home. Of course, we began a new study last quarter. Do what? Still not sounding. Can you hear me when I'm talking? Is it coming over? Now, I think it sounds like it is now. What about in the back? Sound like you can hear it back there, Stephen?
I preached it all out in Alabama.
Okay. After last week, I may need a microphone. Usually, I always laugh and say I take after my dad. I could usually preach without a microphone, but I got up there and they had, of course, Sunday morning Bible class, Sunday morning worship, and then we ate and had a 1 o'clock service. And at the end of the 1 o'clock service, I was kind of feeling like I might be a little bit strained. Thank you. And my voice was feeling just a little bit strained, but nothing major, nothing more than usual after doing, a lot of speaking. But anyway, I woke up Monday. Nothing. I had nothing, no voice. And I was teasing them. I said, my wife's going to be really upset that she missed this. Here I am. I can't even speak. But I got there Monday. I actually changed my sermon Monday afternoon when I realized I'm not going to get my voice back. I've got to change what I'm going to preach. And so I changed it to a sermon where I could have somebody do more reading for me. And so we got through it. But I said at least they'll remember the Monday night sermon from their spring meeting in 2016. It'll be, that guy that came and he squeaked and did his best to talk, but didn't do a very good job of it. But a little better. It was still not great. And I preached a sermon Tuesday night that was one of my favorites, and I felt like I just was handcuffed because I couldn't hardly talk. And then Wednesday night was pretty good. And in fact, Wednesday night I was so excited to be able to talk. I preached for almost an hour, and on top of that, I pretty much preached my voice right back out. And so Thursday, it was kind of not as bad as Monday, but anyway, it was a good week. We are beginning today, even though Bob filled in last week, beginning a new study today. I was teasing Julia. We saw Jake and Julia. I'm going to embarrass Julia a little bit here. But I was teasing her yesterday because we saw them, and she was talking about how she just couldn't wait. Really looking forward to Bob's study on Sunday mornings. And I said, that was actually Bob filling in for me, and I'm going to be back. And so I hate to disappoint you. I know Bob did a great job. He emailed me, I think it was Monday, and said something about what a great job Johnny did and all. And he said, I don't know about the Sunday teacher, though. And I said, well, I know you did a good job. And Bob's always one of the first people I think of if I'm going to be out of town or something, because I know he does such a great job. But anyway, we're going to start a new study in here. I ran across a book. It was at my dad's house. You run across a lot of stuff at my dad's house. My dad could appear in an episode of Hoarders. It's always an adventure when I go to my parents' house because I can just kind of go rummaging around, and you never know what you're going to find. I've come away with flash drives, movies that have been there for years, unopened, still in cellophane wrap, all kinds of stuff. But this particular time, this last visit, I saw a book, and I said, I actually asked him about it, and he had actually read the book. That's unusual. A lot of times he buys stuff and it just sits, and we tease him about that. But he read the book, and he said, boy, that's a good book. And so I read it and began looking through it, and I was pretty impressed with it. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to teach this. It's a book, and the name of the book is Sticks and Stones. That's not the cover of it, but that is the name of the book. And it's a book about the power of words and trying to encourage us all to use good words and to stay away from, of course, that evil words covers a wide range of categories from gossip to, slander and things like that. And we'll talk about more of that as we go along in this study. But I read this book, and I was just really impressed with how he put it. And so some of this I'll change and kind of make my own, but I'll probably use that general guideline of the book for our study. But like I said, when I began, even early on, reading this book, I was really, really impressed. And I thought, you know what? We all need to hear this. Because I think a lot of times we take for granted, and I know I do, the power of words. The power of words to build up or to tear down. This is one of those studies that I actually, I contemplated, because you don't get everybody in a study like this. We have another adult class, and we have children's classes even for those, the teenager, high school. This is a study that I'd actually contemplated turning into just a sermon series so that more people got it, because it's very important. It's very hard-hitting, but I think it's needed. And so that's what we're going to be talking about this quarter. I'd even thought about maybe requesting to bring some of the maybe middle school to high school up here. I don't know, maybe it might work out better just to try to teach it with them at another time because I think a lot of times as young people especially, we forget about the power of words. Just reading through the book myself, I would remember back to times in school when it might be someone teasing me or saying something to me, or, sometimes it might be me saying something to someone else. And you just, especially sometimes as a young person, you take for granted the power that words have to hurt someone and what they can do to another person. But also, I think we take for granted the encouraging power of words. And so we'll look at both sides of that. But that's kind of the general direction of our study. Kind of starting us off here, talking about the power of words. You know the expression, sticks and stones may break my bones, but words may never hurt me. This took me back. When I was a child, I remember I came home one day, and I don't remember what it was, but I would have been elementary school age, probably about Levi's age. He's 10, so I was probably about that age. And somebody had said something to me and kind of teasing me about something. And my mom, with all good intentions, taught me that expression. And she said, well, you just have to remember, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words may never hurt me. I understand we mean well when we're trying to teach someone that, and I'm not trying to critique my mom here, because she was trying to encourage me and uplift me and tell me, don't let that get you down or whatever. But we need to understand the expression is absolutely not true, because words can hurt, and they do hurt. And so we need to respect that and be aware that words have power to hurt, and severely so. Let's go to Proverbs chapter 12. Someone read Proverbs 12:18, please.
There is one who speaks like the piercing of a sword, but the tongue of the wise is most health.
All right, there's one who speaks like the piercings of a sword. You know the damage a sword could do to another person physically. What a sword could do to someone physically, words can do emotionally, and sometimes even in a spiritual sense, putting a stumbling block before someone. And we need to respect that. There are a lot of couple of references here from the book of Psalms. Go over to Psalms chapter 57. David uses this similar analogy several times. And of course, David was a man who many times was slandered himself. Certainly not perfect in his own right, but many times was slandered wrongly so. And who's got 57:4?
My soul is among lions. I lie among the sons of men who are set on fire, whose teeth are spears and arrows, and their tongue a sharp sword.
All right, their teeth are spears and arrows, and their tongue a sharp sword. Now, that's imagery of war describing what their words are doing to him. And that's still just as true today. You can flip over just a page or so to 59, Psalm 59 that is, verse 7. Who's got it? You got that, Chris? Oh, wait, go ahead, brother. They belch out with their mouth. In other words, they spew forth these words, these slanderous type words, evil words. Swords are in their lips. Again, that imagery there of swords. And then finally, Psalm 64, verse 3.
Who sharpen their tongue like a sword, who aim poison words like arrows.
All right? They sharpen their tongue like a sword, words like poison arrows. So again, you see the imagery there used to depict how powerful words can be to harm. But, of course, the flip side is also true. Words have amazing power to help, to heal, and to bless. Let's go back to the book of Proverbs, chapter 16, and verse 24.
Pleasant words are like a honeycomb, sweetness to the soul and health to the bones.
All right, pleasant words. They're like a honeycomb, sweet to the soul, health to the bones. And then, of course, just the opposite page for me, chapter 15, verse 23, a familiar proverb.
Man hath joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season, how good it is.
All right, a word spoken in due season, how good it is. In other words, a word of encouragement at just the right time. I've often said, this July 1st will be 4 years since I've been at Bremen, and one of the things that has always meant so much to me as a preacher is that many of you have at times when there's no way anybody could have known that I was down or just kind of, sometimes you just feel like maybe you just feel like you bombed a sermon or bombed a class or just maybe kind of down in general, and you start thinking, well, am I effective at all? And sometimes just in some of those exact moments, it seems like even sometimes, of course, we just finished a study on providence on Wednesday nights not too long ago, and sometimes I wonder how much of that's providence as well. But there have been times when feeling kind of like that, especially coming in on a Monday, maybe you're kind of feeling like, I don't know, I just didn't feel like did too well yesterday or something. And sometimes there might be an email or sometimes just a text message. A word spoken in due season, how good it is. And having been the recipient of that many times, that's what I want to try to do for other people. And we all ought to want to try to do for other people because you just don't know how much you can encourage somebody with your words. So words spoken in due season. Words have power to hurt. Absolutely. But they also have an amazing power to heal and to bless. Let's consider a few passages. Let me get some volunteers. I'm trying to count how many passages I got here. Let me get. I'll just start with Brother Chris, if you don't mind. Joshua 1:9. Brother Gary, you good with reading? Luke 8:50. Alan. John 8:11. Robert, you good to read? John 14, verses 1 and 2. Who else? Ricky. Matthew 18:4. Tim, I just went blank, Tim. I'm sorry. I don't know. Hey, I called Brother Jim Tom one time. I was thinking Tom Gimlin. I still laugh about that. 2 Corinthians 12:9. Been a long week. Brother Jim, do you mind reading? Okay. Let's see. Brother Scott, Revelation 2:10. And just since you're going to be so close, just go ahead and hold your spot there, and we'll get you to read Revelation 3:21 also. And then the rest of us just get to Proverbs, or not Proverbs, Psalm 52. We'll use that sort of as a contrast. Talking about the power of words to help. Joshua 1:9. Let's see, who had that? Chris?
Have I not commanded you? Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid, nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
All right. It was words. Words are what comforted Joshua as he's preparing to lead the people. He's preparing to take over for the greatest and the only human leader Israel had known up to that point, and had to be an intimidating proposition. You're going to take over for Moses, and nothing's going to change. You're going to go right on into the promised land like we said. You're going to lead them. He knew from experience, he was among the 12 spies. He knew it's a land of giants. It's a land of high walls. It's a land of people who are suited for war. Now, that didn't discourage him because he understood God's with him. And that was what he tried to tell people 40 years previously. However, that had to be a daunting proposition to think about, I'm going to take over and lead these people in. And so God says, using words to Joshua, Joshua, don't be afraid. Don't be dismayed. God is with you. In fact, in that same context, he says, just as I was with Moses, so I'm going to be with you. You can do this because I'm with you. Words. How encouraging that must have been. Think about Luke 8:50. Gary?
When Jesus heard it, he answered him, saying, do not be afraid, only believe, and she will be made well.
Here's a father. Jairus, I believe, is the context. His 12-year-old daughter. Jesus spoke words of comfort. You believe, and I'll take care of the rest. And of course, he healed her. Words. John 8:11.
She said, no one, Lord. And Jesus said to her, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more.
All right, here's the context of a woman who's taken in adultery. They bring her to Jesus just to see what he's going to say. Moses says she ought to be put to death. Of course, they conveniently don't bring the man. They say she's caught in the very act. Well, where's the man? They bring her. You can imagine the embarrassment. She's caught in as one fellow put it, a storm of immorality. That's not excusing her behavior, but here's a woman, she's caught up in serious sin. And Jesus says to her, he doesn't say, oh, it's okay, don't worry about it. But he says, neither do I condemn you. Go and sin no more. He tells her to get out of that behavior. But he says, there's hope. Words of encouragement. John 14:1 and 2.
Let not your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you. I go to prepare a place for you.
Very apprehensive disciples of Jesus. What's going to happen? There's a lot of uncertainty surrounding him right now because he's trying to explain to them, I'm about to leave. I'm going to be killed. I'm going to be betrayed. I'll rise again the third day, but then he's going to ascend into heaven. And so he's kind of helping prepare them. There's some apprehension. There's some uncertainty. Jesus uses words. Don't let your heart be troubled. You believe in God, believe also in me. And he says, when I go, I'm not just leaving you. I'm going to prepare a place for you. And if I go and prepare a place, I'll come again and receive you into myself. Later on in that same context, I believe it's in the same chapter there, he's going to say, I will not leave you. The King James has comfortless. Other versions have it more accurately translated. It's the same word as in James 1:27. Pure religion and undefiled before God and the Father is this, to visit the, what? Fatherless and widows in their affliction. That same word, fatherless, is what Jesus says back over there in that context in John. He says, I will not leave you orphans, in other words. That's how some translations actually translate it. And so the idea there is words, comforting them. I'm not just going to up and abandon you. But it was words that comforted those disciples. Matthew 18:4. Here's a child sitting on the lap of Jesus. You may remember not all that long ago, we had the young folks up here, and we did a lesson on Sunday morning about Jesus loves the little children. And if you remember that context, some of the disciples were rebuking the children and rebuking the parents for bringing them. It was kind of I don't know, did they resent the children? Did they think Jesus was too busy? But imagine if you're that child and you're old enough to understand somebody doesn't want me here. But what did Jesus do? He spoke words of encouragement. Not just to the people there, but how that must have encouraged that little child sitting on his lap when he heard, except you become like this little child, this child that you think is getting in the way, or you're resenting this child, whatever it may be, except you become as this child, you cannot enter into the kingdom of heaven. Comforting words for that child. 2 Corinthians 12:9.
And he said unto me, my grace is sufficient for thee, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Most gladly, therefore, will I rather glory in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me.
Here's an apostle, suffered much for his Lord. I mean, he was put through the ringer. And he has this thorn in the flesh. We don't know what it was. We could speculate, but we don't know. Whatever it was, he says, I besought the Lord. We would say he begged the Lord 3 times, please take this away. And Jesus, he didn't take the thorn in the flesh away, but what he does is he speaks words of comfort to Paul, and he says, my grace is sufficient. My grace is sufficient. And you know what Paul ends that verse with? Most gladly, therefore, will I endure these infirmities. Words of comfort. Revelation 2:10.
Do not dread what you are to suffer. True, the devil is going to throw some of you in prison, so you will be tested. And for 10 days you will have trouble. Be loyal, though it means your death, and I will give you the crown of life.
All right, he says, Jesus speaking here to suffering saints in Smyrna. Again, he doesn't take away the suffering. He doesn't say, I'm gonna just take all that away. There's a certain proving aspect and purifying aspect of suffering. But he says, be faithful. Be faithful to the point of death, even to death, and I will give you a crown of life. Words of comfort to saints who are suffering tremendously there in Smyrna. Even to the saints at Laodicea, who were one of the ones that we would say nothing good was said about them, and yet there's a promise made. Go ahead, chapter 3, verse, 21? Yeah.
As for the victor, I will grant him to sit beside me on my throne, as I also conquered and sat down beside my Father on his throne.
Some pretty strong words for Laodicea previously in that context. He says, you're lukewarm. Because you're lukewarm, you're not hot, you're not cold, I'm going to spew you out. But he says, to the one that overcomes, I'm going to grant with him to sit with me in my throne. Again, words of encouragement, words of strengthening. Oscar Wilde made a statement, and I think it's absolutely true. Oh, I'm about to forget about Psalm 52. Let's go there. And this is kind of just the flip side of the coin, what we just looked at. All these encouraging spots, and that's just a sampling, of course, what we could look at in the Bible. Just go through the ministry of Jesus sometime and look at the encouragement that he gives over and over and over, especially to people who have been ripped apart by malicious words from others. John 9 is one that just stands out in my mind. In fact, at some point, it's not in the book, but at some point we may do just a particular lesson on John chapter 9. That is one of my favorite passages, just to see the heart of Jesus. These people, those Pharisees, they were just hateful to that man. And Jesus comes along in the midst of all that and encourages him and helps him, and of course heals him physically as well, but more importantly is what Jesus does spiritually there. Psalm 52, David is talking here, and if you got a little inscription there at the top to the chief musician, but it says, when Doeg the Edomite came and told Saul, and said unto him, David is come to the house of Ahimelech. Doeg betrayed David, trying to get David caught by Saul. Oh, he's right here. Come and get him. Arrest him. Saul was after David without any kind of cause. And now here's Doeg turning on David without any kind of cause. And so poor David didn't ask to be king. God made him king. That was God's decision. And David has to feel frustrated at times. And it comes out in some of these Psalms where he says, I didn't ask for all this. And yet here I am, I'm being pursued without cause. People are, I stop at a guy's house and now he's going and he's, somebody else is going and saying, well, David's here. Come and get him. Come arrest him. He's yours for the taking. And so he says, why boastest thou thyself in mischief, O mighty man? The goodness of God endureth continually. Thy tongue deviseth mischiefs like a sharp razor, working deceitfully. Thou lovest evil more than good, lying rather than to speak righteousness. Thou lovest all devouring words, O thou deceitful tongue. So again, contrasted with the positive words of these other passages. Here's the quote I mentioned from Oscar Wilde. Some cause happiness wherever they go, others whenever they go. Now let that sink in. Isn't that true? I don't know about you, but I don't want to be a person that I brighten a room by leaving it. Don't you want to be a person that people understand, yeah, you're not perfect, but you do your best to encourage others, to build them up, to edify with your words. That's all in a choice. It really frustrates me too, because sometimes people who are kind of known for tearing down with their words, sometimes the attitude will be, well, that's just the way I am. We don't give a pass on anything else. Can you imagine? Here's a man who wants to be a faithful member of the congregation. And he goes to the elders and says, I want to place membership. You should know, though, I drink a lot of alcohol. And it's just the way I am. So I just want y'all to understand that. Don't try to change me or anything. Well, we wouldn't be okay with that. Some guy comes and says, I do drugs, but I want to place my membership here. I have no intention of quitting. That's just how I am. Think about it. I go out and I pick fights with people all the time, fist fights. But, that's just the way I am. So don't come visiting me and preaching to me about it or whatever. That's just how I am. Nobody will be so foolish. But when it comes to malicious words, slander, gossip, and things like that, we often let people get away with that. Well, that's just how I am. Think about that. I want to be somebody who causes happiness wherever I go. That's in our choice. That's in our power to do and to be. Let's love good words. The devil's dinner. A lot of this comes from the book. Some of this imagery. I think he did a good job with this. Satan, of course, according to 1 Peter 5:8, he walks about as a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. And as the fellow says in the book, he wants you for dinner. He wants your tears as his beverage. He wants your ruined reputation for his entree. And for dessert, he wants your crippled effectiveness. He's a glutton for gossip, and he often fattens himself on whispers and feasts on foolish talk. Words are some of Satan's most effective utensils that he has to harm the crown of God's creation, humans. I mean, you think of the damage done throughout all history by words. A lot of times we think of wars and the damage done in wars, but think about how many wars were started because of words. It's a sobering thought to think about. As the devil devours us, he wants us to turn around and then devour others. And how often is that not the case, isn't it? This fellow in the book, I like this. He says the devil's words ought not to be ingested, digested, or regurgitated. And that is absolutely true. When it comes to these evil words, don't listen to them. Sure, don't take them to heart and dwell on them, and by all means, don't go out and spread them and repeat them. So it ought not to be ingested, digested, or regurgitated. That's pretty clever play on words there, but it's absolutely true. The devil's words should be hated, avoided at all costs. What does Romans 12:9 say? Somebody look it up. Or we can all just turn there. Abhor. Anybody remember it? Abhor that which is evil. I think that's what it says. Anyway, make sure I got the right reference. I've missed it before. Yes, let love be without dissimulation, but mainly the middle part of this verse. Abhor that which is evil, cleave to that which is good. You want to stay away from what's evil, cling, stay close to what is good. Does that not apply to our words too? Again, this is something that sometimes we apply to other things, but we don't apply to our words. We need to make sure we apply this in all areas of life, including our words. There are a lot of reasons to love good words, a lot of reasons to hate bad words. And I don't mean necessarily, although it would certainly be included, what we would call swear words. When we're little, we talk about bad words. We think about cuss words and things like that. But I'm talking about evil words in general. But especially because of the pain that those words can bring. What is wrong with us when we're not affected by inflicting pain on someone else? We say, maybe you watch a TV show or something and the guy's torturing, or we hear of stories of someone torturing another person. We just shudder and think, how is that possible? But isn't that sometimes what we can do with our words? It's not a physical torture, but it is an emotional, mental torture sometimes. You see why I say this is a hard-hitting study. And I mean, it right here, it gets me as well. Because there's so many times that I think, and again, I can only speak for myself, but I think others would agree with me if we're honest. We just don't think about these things sometimes. The power of words. I would never torture someone physically, and yet sometimes we torture people through our words. And maybe even not necessarily to that person's face. I tried to find an author for this. I couldn't find it, but it's powerful. So it says, my name is gossip. I have no respect for justice. I maim without killing. I break hearts and ruin lives. I am malicious and cunning and gather strength with age. The more I am quoted, the more I am believed. I flourish at every level of society. My victims are helpless. They cannot protect themselves against me because I have no name and no face. To track me down is impossible. The harder you try, the more elusive I become. I am nobody's friend. Once I tarnish a reputation, it is never the same. I topple governments and ruin marriages. I ruin careers and cause sleepless nights, heartache, and indigestion. I spawn suspicion and generate grief. I make innocent people cry in their pillows. Even my name hisses. I am called gossip. How true that is. Do words hurt? Sometimes people say, again, the sticks and stones expression. If you want to know, do words hurt? Here are just a few examples. Ask the child who is called stupid by a parent if words hurt. You want to talk about stinging words. Ask the preacher who has to sit down with his family and say, we need to move. Not because maybe it's just time to move or there's just a loss of effectiveness or something for other reasons, but I mean because rumors, gossip, things like that. Ask the innocent man in prison who sits there because a jury believed a lie. People get on the witness stand. They hold their hand up. I swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And then they lie. And an innocent man goes to prison. It's happened. The joke is everybody in prison is innocent. But there are innocent people there who are there because evil words, lies, slander. Ask the first grader who's on the playground being picked on, maybe being called ugly, maybe being called stupid, maybe being called weird. Ask that kid, do words hurt? Do words have power? You'll find out they do. Ask the bachelor about whom people say and whisper, he might be gay. I remember this when I was, this took me back reading this list of things about do words hurt came from the book. And I remember reading that, seeing it, and I remembered. I was in 4th grade, I think, and we had a teacher in my elementary school, assistant principal as well, a good man, really, really nice guy, but he was single. And that's what people would whisper. Did you hear about him? He's gay. And one day, he somehow caught wind of that. And I'll never forget it. With tears in his eyes, he told us that he had loved a young lady long ago, loved her with all his heart, wanted to marry her, and she broke his heart. And he said, I never had a desire to marry again after that. He said, that was my one true love. And he said, it just never happened for me after that. And he said, that's why I'm single. Man, people are running around saying things like that. You think words don't hurt? You think words don't have power? Ask the coach's wife. Ask the coach's wife. Miss Deborah's not here to testify to this. But ask the coach's wife who has to listen to all the experts in the stands slam her husband because they know how to do everything so much better, right? You think words don't hurt? Ask the politician. There are good politicians, believe it or not, but ask the one who's had his career ruined because of slander from an opponent, gossip. Ask the wife whose husband calls her names or says hateful things to her. You think words don't have power? Ask the parents who buried their teenager because of the power of words. People continually calling her fat, stupid, ugly, weird, whatever, to the point that she goes and she takes her own life. You think words don't have power? Ask God. Look at these passages. This may be where we run out of time here, but let's look at these real quick. In fact, Brother Tim, will you get James 3? That'll save us a little bit of time here. Proverbs 11:9. Who's got it? Hypocrite with his mouth destroys his neighbor. Destroy. That's a strong word. Proverbs 18:8. The words of a talebearer are as wounds. They go down into the innermost parts of the belly. James 3:6, Brother Tim.
And the tongue is a fire.
Fire. Go ahead.
A world of iniquity. So is the tongue among our members.
A fire, a world of iniquity. Strong language. Go ahead to verse 8.
Verse 8, you don't want me to finish verse 7. I see.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
That it may defile the whole body and set it on fire, the course of nature, and it is set on fire of hell.
Power to defile the entire body. Again, you see how strong the language? All right, go ahead with verse 8.
But the tongue can no man tame. It is an unruly evil, full of deadly poison.
You think words don't have power to hurt? God says you better believe that they do. I want to cover this one real quick. There are a lot of tragic examples. I'm not going to go through a lot of these for time's sake, but you probably know many examples yourself. There are several he gives in the book of real life stories of situations where children took their lives because of being bullied by children at school. But we need to understand these examples teach us senseless words can lead to senseless loss. For the person who is bullied, I just always encourage people, don't let that, I understand sticks and stones have, or words rather, the sticks and stones expression is not true. Words have power to hurt. Don't let that impact you negatively in your view of yourself. God says you're fearfully, wonderfully made, Psalm 139:14. You're designed by Him, you're loved by Him, and you're loved by Him so much that He sent His Son to purchase you back with His blood. But for us, for the adults, coaches, teachers, grandparents, parents, be alert, be aware, and be vigilant. Be the wall that stands between the bully and his or her victim. And decide we're not going to put up with it. I tell my children if I ever, I had times in school when I got bullied, And I'm ashamed to admit there were times when I picked at someone else. I'm sorry for it, and I've repented of it, and I'd take it back if I could. But I tell my children, if I ever catch you bullying another child or trying to hurt someone with your words, we're going to have a problem. I mean, that is serious, and I don't put up with it. And I tell my children, I say, I don't want you ever causing trouble at school, and I don't want you trying to get into fights or anything like that, but if you see somebody being bullied, you step in and you stop it. And you stop it right then. You find an adult, you find a teacher, but you don't put up with it. It is out of control. And people need to understand words are powerful and they hurt. Let's stop there. I don't want to get into this slide when I can't finish it up. I hope this is going to be a good study. I'm looking forward to it. I've been blessed by it already, just reading through the book, and even more so studying and preparing for these lessons. I appreciate your attention. We're going to have a short break before our worship, of course, but thank you very much. Looking forward to this study.